it's really my pleasure to be hosting one of the My Footpath interview series. And my name is Dr. Sarah Steinberg. I am an advisory board member for My Footpath, and I'm also recently retired and now the Provost Emeritus for the University of Arizona Global Campus, and also previous time at Johns Hopkins University. I'm here today, I'm so excited to be here today with Dr. Brooke Barnett, who is the provost and also responsible, of course, for academic affairs at Butler University, and Dr. Deanna Leone, I apologize, who is the Associate Dean for Retention at Olympic College. We also may be joined mid-interview, hopefully we will be joined by Dr. Rochelle Ford, who is the president of Dillard University. So we'll keep our fingers crossed that she's able to join us. Before we dive into this very interesting topic, which is the topic of the day about empowering women in leadership roles in higher education, I just wanted to give each of you a minute to introduce yourselves, since all I did was your name and title, and just tell us for a minute briefly about you. And Brooke, if you would like to start, that would be great.
Sure, I'm happy to, and honored to be here. And I think since we're talking about women in leadership, it really is probably befitting to know that President Ford has been taken away right now to try to deal with something that's happening on her campus, which is probably pretty common for how we think about what women and leaders are really facing in terms of higher ed right now. So, and perfect timing.
And perfect timing.
Her to join us right now too as well. So we were just talking about you, President Ford.
Oh, wow. Hey, life is never what you expect it to be when you are a college administrator, and trying to be a mom and trying to be all that women are called to be in leadership roles.
We just got started, so you're here right at the perfect time.
Well, while you're at it, since you're getting in the passenger seat, we just started with introductions. You want to start with yours and you can kick us off? We're doing a very brief one. All we've said is your name and title so far.
So, hi, Rochelle Ford, eighth president of Dillard University. And what else would you like to know?
Something that everybody doesn't know.
I am a proud mother. I'm a Christ follower. I am a daughter. I've been single and parenting most of my adult life. And it's been an amazing joy to integrate work and life.
Isn't that what it's always about? And you just gave a fabulous example of what it is all about. So thank you. And Brooke, back to you.
No, sure, of course. So you've already said the title. I work at Butler University. Prior to that, I spent 18 years at Elon University, which is how Rochelle and I knew each other, is intersecting at that university. And before that, I was at Indiana University, Bloomington. So second tour in Indiana, although I don't have an Indiana connection otherwise. I'm not sure I'm going to tell you something people don't know because I'm kind of an open book about my life, but something sometimes if you don't know me, people might be surprised about is I grew up on a farm in a very rural, a remote area in Kentucky. And so there were a lot of learning for me, at least post-college, even and into early adulthood, around interacting with people from different religious backgrounds and different parts of the country and different spaces of the country. And so I had a pretty insular and very deeply religious, I grew up in an evangelical tradition. So we went to church 3 times a week. And that was a big part of kind of who I am and what my life was like. Also, some of the things that President Ford mentioned, I am a lot of family roles that are very, very important to me. So I'm from a really large, extended and close family. And so that's a big part of kind of who I am and how I operate. And we are now empty nesters. And so we're trying to figure out life with adult children who are living elsewhere and living their best lives. And it's a little bit sad, but also really exciting as well. So that's a little bit about me.
It is.
And Brooke has amazing style. She rocks the cowboy boots, and I love
it.
Thank you for that.
Deanna, you want to jump in with your info and something we don't know about you?
Yeah, well, thank you, everyone. I'm really excited and honored to be here. Dr. Deanna Leone, working currently at Olympic College as an Associate Dean of Retention. My professional career has straddled both student affairs and academic affairs. Been in higher ed for a little over 25 years at multiple different institutions. I grew up in Pennsylvania. I'm a second-generation Italian-American, and something unique currently to my women leadership journey is balancing all the family, the work, the life, taking care of both actually multiple generations ranging from kids to grandkids to parents at the moment. So all while transitioning into a brand new job. So I'm sure lots more of that will come out in the questions.
That's great. Well, I already introduced myself. The thing I always like people to know is we have 4 grandchildren and a new one on the way in August. So that's what it is all about. So we're going to jump into this topic of empowering women in higher education. How about each of you sharing your #1 tip? I know you have probably 25 tips at least, but how about the #1 tip that you've got for the best way to empower women leaders in higher ed? And if you could attach maybe a personal story or something to your idea here, or your suggestion that might let our listeners know why it's important to you that you made that suggestion.
So one thing that I think is really important about empowering other women is listening and validating. I think often when we make decisions, sometimes our decisions are questioned as female leaders, and so they're not often validated. So specifically when I'm working with other women, I try to really listen and really validate. And an example of this actually just came up recently. Again, I'm in a new role. I've spent the last 30 days on a listening tour of my colleagues and saying, what's happening in your life? Help me know the lay of the land and your experience on this campus. And this woman, very strong director, longstanding career, said to me, sometimes I think I'm crazy. And she was sharing a particular personal story about a work experience. And I just looked at her and said, you're not crazy. What you're experiencing is real. What you're feeling is real. People may have different perceptions of the experience, but your experience is your experience, and that's real. And that does not make you crazy. And so I think that's critical in how we support other women.
Yep, well said.
I'll jump in if that's okay. So again, Rochelle Ford, I think being authentically you. Oftentimes we think we have to emulate, replicate, duplicate what others have done and how they have been a leader, but you need to be authentically you. And not feel as if you have to hide your identities, because your vulnerabilities are actually what make you strong. And when we don't bring our whole selves into situations, we're not modeling inclusivity, because it is a vulnerable act, but it's also an act of power, and it's an act that will help open the door to other people bringing their whole selves to work, which is what the beauty of diversity is and what we strive for in inclusion. And that's how we break down doors of justice so that we can have equity, right? And so I say that, not that you're going to be like, oh, here's my drama and my medication I'm taking today, right? But what it is that for me, the fact that I'm single and parenting, I own that, right? For me, I don't hide the fact that I'm a Christ follower, but I don't put it in a way that you can't be Buddhist or non-believing or anything. It's just part of who I am and my identity. And how does my being and identifying as an African-American woman who was raised in predominantly Caucasian community, proud graduate of HBCU, proud, of the fact that I'm second generation college student, like I own who I am, and I allow that to inform me, but also to embrace folks who are different than me and what I can learn from them, but not try to hide the fact of who I am and what my lived experiences are. So bring your whole self to work, being authentically you.
I love it. Love it.
I love both of those answers, and want to affirm and say ditto to them. I guess one I'll try to add is maybe the notion of sponsorship. So I know we talk a lot about mentorship, which I think is really important, but the related and adjacent concept of sponsorship. So thinking about, I try to take seriously the opportunity to sponsor women and gender diverse leaders and helping to support them with mock interviews, nominations for jobs and awards, bringing people into writing and presenting, and looking for ways to network and connect. I have a little side hustle going on for no pay. It's not a very good side hustle, but talking with women about their career trajectories and helping support them in their current and future roles. And so you identified us as a small group that were part of a planned presentation at AAC&U, which is another example of that. How do you bring people across your network together across multiple institutions to have those kinds of connections, which I think are really important. And so as a small example, but an important one to me, when President Ford and I knew each other in a different context, in a different environment, a different institution, I had just joined the Arthur Page Society, which is an organization she'd been part of for a long time. And she immediately brought me into the DEI committee that she led of that organization. That's a great example of a way to think about, sponsorship. How do you connect people up with opportunities that will be beneficial to each other? And I try to think as much as I can how to pay that forward, because I have benefited from that in really tremendous ways.
So a couple of you have mentioned this conference, the presentation that you made at AAC&U. And I was just wondering, as you bring it forward and you think about this topic of empowering women and look to the future, I wonder if you could share a couple of outcomes of that presentation. I'm sorry that I missed it, but I have heard that it was an excellent presentation and I wish I had seen it. But what can you share with the audience about what came out of the discussion that you had, and what do you envision in terms of the future of empowering women? Are we in a good place? Do we need, can we get to a better place?
I'll start at least with that one. I guess I want to first pay an homage to our colleague, Bailing Shaw, who's the one who got us all together to do this presentation in the first place. And she's a dean at Cal State Fullerton, and also another connector through that same organization I mentioned in the same disciplinary context as well. So I think that from this conversation, when I mentioned kind of that little cottage industry I have going for no pay, some of those are people that were just in that room who said, you volunteered and offered, can I, would you nominate me for this? Would you, look at my resume for this or do a mock interview with me from that? So it's kind of those connected areas, which I think are really helpful. I serve on the board for HERS, so an organization that's focused on women and gender diverse leaders in higher education. And so they have a series. If you participated in HERS a while ago, there were sort of the institutes. You went, in my case, I went for 2 weeks and lived on the college campus in the residence hall. There's different versions of programs now. That's still one of the ones they have. I think that's now more of a 10-day program. If you participated a while ago, it was like 4 weeks. So they've kind of decreased it, just understanding people's busy lives. But they have equity-minded leadership, which is teams of people in different ways. They have webinar series. They had a series of other next stages, next steps for people who are thinking about what they want to do next. So that presentation also connected some people up to some of those resources to get involved with organizations that are trying to think about these connections as well. So those were 2 outcomes that I found to be beneficial from this conversation.
That's great.
So that was another example of how presidents' lives get shifted, and what you think you might be doing today might very much so change, and you end up doing another thing. It was really exciting to be able to have my newest colleague, our new provost for Dillard University, Dr. Monique Guillory, to actually be represented on that panel. And it goes back to that idea of sponsorship and allowing other people to shine, and that you don't have to be the focal point of attention. And so again, I think that that's part of the modeling behavior that is important, is that we do share the light and allow each other to tell their stories, and how do we sponsor each other to walk into spaces where we otherwise, they otherwise would not be in. And so then to be able to participate in this conversation and to share from a presidential perspective, and I'm kind of a sophomore president. It's been a year and 20 months of it being in this role, but being able to incorporate my perspective, as well as having Monique to be live and in person as a new provost, but having many years of higher education as chief of staff and as a vice president of academic affairs. It's that demonstration of the sponsorship, a demonstration of letting others to shine, and being okay with almost lessons in delegation as well, because sometimes we think we have to do it all ourselves, and we don't. We can live and be in community and help each other to grow and give each other opportunity by doing so.
I'll add a piece about the second part of your question of what still needs to be done, or what does the future look like. I think there's still a lot of work that needs to be done in empowering women. So, I think about myself and my own journey, and the women in this call that I'm privileged to be a part of. Like, we've had some great opportunities, right? We have advantages, we have education, we have all sorts of things that give us opportunity. People have sponsored us, all the outcomes my colleagues have been talking about. But I juxtapose that with the community and the population that I'm currently working with, many of whom the students, and I'll focus just on the female students, they're living in poverty. Many of the population are struggling parents, single parents. Some have been incarcerated. Some are returning back to the workforce after maybe not being gainfully employed at the level that they should, or needing to do something to make a change for their family. And so as women in these circumstances, if we don't do some of the things my colleagues have been talking about and continue to move that work forward, I think we will continue to see women falter. And we all know that that's even more detrimental when you think about some of the other hardships that people face, the other identities that people hold, people of color, low income, first gen, those without the experiences of education. So to your second point of your question, I absolutely think there's more work to be done, and we have to think about the whole story. That does absolutely matter.
Absolutely. I want to recognize that, Brooke, I think you're going to have to run, and we really appreciate your participation here. If Deanna and Rochelle, you can stay on for another minute. I just wanted to follow up on what you just said about what we can do in the future. I think, and Brooke, certainly, if you can stay, that would be great. But
it was a pleasure. I'll have to duck out. I'm sure they'll say great things. I'll listen as long as I can, and then I'll just leave. But it was great to see everybody.
Thank you so much for participating. Really appreciate it. One of the things I'm interested in is exactly what you were talking about. I agree. I don't think that we're in a great place yet. I think there are a lot of opportunities, but I saw the same thing with the students that we have at the University of Arizona Global Campus, women with multiple responsibilities who are setting examples for their family. Them getting a degree is really not about their degree. It's about the generations that are following and all of the people in their families and in their circle and their environment that are watching them. and they're setting an example that will be followed and will be enhancing. And so I was wondering if you have any words of advice for either your current institutions or institutions that you've been in, where you can take some of these learnings that you guys have been talking about and apply them to the advice that you give to the president, Rochelle, to yourself, to your board, and to the leadership that you have around you to do more in your institution. Have anything to contribute along those lines?
So I appreciate the question, and that is very much so the case at Dillard University, where I'm serving right now. And the case of one, that we have about 80%, nearly 80% of our student body are Pell Grant eligible. So they're representing some of the lowest socioeconomic levels in the nation, but also recognizing the power of a degree is also a pathway forward to their own social mobility. And so what I have been emphasizing as a leader, and I think all institutions need to do, is what we're calling our 5 Ps, right? So it's living on purpose. So how do we live on purpose for our institution and being true to the mission of who did we say that we are, right? And so for our institution, it's about being authentically ourselves as a historically Black institution, right? That cultivates leaders who live ethically, think and communicate precisely, and act courageously to make the world a better place. So you have to live on purpose. Then secondly, you have to make sure that you focus on the people, and that means the whole person. Oftentimes we look almost at students or faculty staff and numbers, and it's retention, it's graduation, it's persistence, and it's numbers. Or we think about our budget and we see numbers and we don't see people. And so the question is, for us, living on purpose and cultivating leaders, that means that we have to do that for everyone, whether it is our students, our faculty, our staff, our community, and we're looking at it in a holistic, your body, your mind, your spirit. The whole piece is what's going to help you to be successful academically, and your leadership roles in the home and the family, what have you. So it's living on purpose, focusing on people, on the whole person. But it's also willing to recognize that you have to pivot, because how we approach higher education, to 2024 is different than what we need to do 2024 and moving forward, right?
Mhm.
COVID was real, is a real impact. We have to pivot for that. We have to pivot to recognize that reproductive rights have changed. And so how do we provide for people who, like in my state, have no choice but to have a baby, right? Or to go out of state, and be careful which state you go to, right? So how do we provide for the whole health of our students? We have to pivot. We have to pivot to recognize that even as an institution that was founded in Christian principles, and supported philanthropically by the Jewish American community, that most of my students are people of no faith, right? No faith tradition. So how do I pivot to address that? How do I pivot that the economic structure, the financial model of higher education is completely broken, and that the fastest growing populations do not have the funding to be educated? How do we pivot? And so that you live on purpose, you're focusing on the people, but you have to be willing to pivot. But then you also have to recognize that there's power in the pivot. And so sometimes by doing something differently, you're actually going to reap a greater reward and you will have progress. And so there's power in the pivot. And then when you get that power, how do you use that power to move forward that allows you to fully live your mission and continue to be living on purpose? So I guess I say that's what's necessary to move forward, to recognize purpose, people, pivot, power, and progress.
Way better than the 4 Ps of marketing. Way better. I love it. Deanna, what thoughts do you
I'm not sure if I have more I can contribute to that. That was
I
really
know it's hard act to follow.
I will just add, since we do have a little bit of time, I think this concept of the whole person is so critical, and something I've been thinking about at my current institution, and that I've seen over my lifetime in multiple institutions, is that we don't often think about, I'll add a P, perspective. So a lot of times we set policies or practices, I'm keeping with the P theme, and it's in like higher ed jargon, or it's in policy jargon, or it's in federal mandate jargon. I'm working on a document right now that's a work plan, and there's really 2 simple questions, and it's an 18-page document. I'm like, there's 2 simple questions at the core of what you're asking. So bottom line, I think we have to think about perspective, and that is the perspective of our students. And if we're going to eliminate barriers to make to make education more accessible, so that students can truly get what they need, so that their lives can be better, their future generations can be better and so forth. I do think I constantly tell our institutions, think about the student perspective. What do they really need to see on this form? What do they really need to fill out? What are they really experiencing? Is this program about them or about us? So I think that's the other piece that I typically give as institutional advice, and something that's always in my core thinking as I'm making decisions and taking action and leading the teams I work with.
Yeah, a great balance on this question between the two of you, with Rochelle setting a holistic strategy for the institution's approach to the students, and Deanna, you really looking at that larger umbrella of issues, but making it very specific to student success. And I think the two go together so well, and were so well articulated by both of you. I really, I love it. We are out of time. I want to be very respectful of your time and your day, but this conversation could go on for a long time. I am so excited to be part of the conversation on women empowerment. It's something obviously very close to my heart as well, and to the work that I have done over my career. So I'm so glad that you and Brooke, who is here in spirit, have shared some of your thoughts and experiences on this topic. I hope that my footpath makes a decision to have part number 2, hint, hint, and we continue this conversation. So thank you again very much.